If the Star Wars series was rated R, what scenes would have changed? We would have seen Leia's interrogation scene in Episode 4. The scene of Anakin slaughtering the Sand People would have been more brutal. And he would have found his mom is much worse shape than just passed out in a tent. This will probably be missed by most of the thread, but when these movies were first coming out, my mom had a friend who worked as a writer's assistant for these movies, or something like that. Anyways, we would get sent a script once every 3 or 4 months. Usually just a partial one, but by the time the first trailer dropped we would have the whole thing. One of the writer's notes on that scene always stuck with me: when the Sand People enter the tent it is supposed to be much more brutal. His mom dies in his arms, Anakin hears Sand People approaching. The natural fire light has faded to a soft glow now, and as the 2 Sand People enter, one is immediately killed. The second is knocked down and Anakin slowly pushes the saber into its chest, never looking away. The Sand Person screams in pain but Anakin doesn't mind. Finally the victim falls silent. That was never put into the film obviously, but it was a little brutal for my young mind to imagine. Looking back, if they were rated R it could have been a character-defining moment, the first true signs of life from Vader. There was also a strange scene with Yoda and Chewie teaming up and hiding in mud to kill stormtroopers in Episode 3, I'm glad that got cut. It was too cartoony. Chewie tearing someone's arms off. Jabba's dancers would have been topless. Maybe Anakin's slaughter of the Sand People or younglings would have been played out to be more cruel. I think they are better off not actually showing the kids get killed, you know what happens, and it doesn't risk coming across as a juvenile snuff film. I'm cool with the Sand People slaughter scene though, the moisture farmers of the Outer Rim deserve retribution. Obi-Wan's fight during the cantina scene would have been a bloody slaughter of the entire bar set to Freebird. I would love to see the cantina band just hearing the sound of the lightsaber, glance at each other, then put down their space oboes and pick up guitars, then just jam the freak out the entire time Obi-Wan is slaughtering all the holes in the bar. Once he is done they would pick up their space oboes and play on like nothing even happened. The prequels would have definitely been way better. From my point of view, the Jedi are holes. Little Anakin would have been way creepier in his interest in Padme while on the ship, like watching her sleep or something in The Phantom Menace. The love story in Episode 2 would have some payoff. The raid of the Jedi Temple would have been more brutal. Leia being tortured/drugged interrogation. Obi-Wan wouldn't have disappeared into the Force. After the Death Star blew up, a bloody stormtrooper helmet would have bounced off of someone's canopy. Menacing insinuation of torture would be replaced with explicit, on-screen torture. Clean, crisp deaths by laser fire and explosions would be replaced by people crying out in agony at having their flesh seared and their limbs blown off. Silly, alien language swear words would be replaced by freak and crap and the like. Characters clearly intended to be suggestive and provocative in their attire would be partially, if not wholly nude. Substance abuse would be a thing. Episode 1, Naboo Invasion includes scenes of barbaric civilian slaughter in the street by a motionless droid set to kill. Trade Federation leader makes not-so-veiled comments on his lecherous intentions for Queen Amidala after the conquest. Darth Sidious told us to make her submit. He did not say what we must do afterwards. Slave brutality rampant on Tatooine. We are shown the effect of the detonating device instead of being told about it by Anakin/Shmi. Pod race has very visceral crash wreckage aftermath. Chancellor Valorum is ousted because of falsified evidence of him making love to Jawas, or children. Maybe Jawa children. Qui-Gon is slowly stabbed a la Saving Private Ryan instead quickly. Maul's guts are in full view as he falls. I could do all the other movies, but this post is old already and no one really reads comments hours later, so I should probably stop. You get the idea anyways. Okay, so you know how in the first 10 minutes of Episode 7 Kylo stops a laser bolt in midair, and then lets it fire after he steps out of its way? And now it explodes like a small bomb when it hits? Imagine that hitting people. People are not made to withstand bomb blasts. There's a lot of people hit by blaster bolts in his Star Wars movies, so we would see more visceral and bloody shootouts more than anything else, I think. And I don't think mass-produced stormtrooper armor would work well against those things. Nice try, Lucas. Guys, don't give him any ideas for the re-releases. More cursing and dirty jokes/language throughout the movies. General feel of the movies would be darker. Anakin and Padme sex scene on Naboo in Episode 2. Anakin slaughtering the Tuskens and the younglings would be more graphic and brutal. Jabba's dancers, and Leia maybe, would be topless. More graphic deaths, not necessarily blood, but maybe more dismemberment. This probably the right answer. Also, an R rating would have kept a lot, not all, but a lot of kids of the time from seeing it over and over, and it would not have had the same cultural cash that it does. It would probably fall into that Blade Runner type category of admired, but not a door. That part in episode 7 with that murder ball tentacled thing would have been so much more. Bloody is not descriptive enough. I'm gonna go with chunky. Lightsaber injuries would be more than just a burned stump. There would be blood-curdling screaming, flames licking up their arms, disfiguring burns as the shaft of plasma just gets near their face. Not to mention alien nudity. Vader would have been a proper freak. Graphically torturing Leia in that interrogation scene, getting a blowjob in his little meditation chamber thing, ripping off faces with the Force, drinking blood, killing random people for fun, disfiguring people with his lightsaber, etc. Instead, he's somewhat genteel about everything. A polite Force joke, always done to punish incompetence, never out of naked malice, maybe say something intimidating, etc. As is he's not much different than most people's bosses, just replace the Force choking with being fired. He's an organized and effective upper management person with great negotiation and leadership skills. Freak that, make him a terrifying psycho. Think how Baron Harkonnen is portrayed in the Dune movie as an example of a messed up person with a lot of power being frightening. Jar Jar Binks either never would have existed, or would be exactly the same, but we would love him as a break from all the dark ass crap. His accent would have been toned down, and he would be clumsy as in trips and falls a lot, but not irritatingly so. He'd also be unfailingly loyal, to the point where when Anakin left Jar Jar would try to go with him, but Anakin would have to make him stay behind. Kind of like a puppy that's just really happy to be near him. It would be heartbreaking to see Jar Jar be so blinded by Palpatine, that he makes the motion to give Palpatine the emergency power necessary to make the army. And then in the end Palpatine would pull Jar Jar aside and tell him that the Separatists were planning an assassination attempt, and the safest place for Jar Jar would be the Jedi Temple. Palpatine would be attacked by Mace Windu, Anakin protects him and is inducted to the Sith as Darth Vader. Then Anakin is sent out to kill all the Jedi, starting at the temple. He fights his way into the temple and kills several Jedi, showing he's much more powerful now with the dark side. He takes the elevator to the Jedi Council room where the children are being kept for safety. On his way there Palpatine tells him his first trial to continue in the Sith Order is to kill the first thing he sees when the elevator door opens. It opens in slow motion to show Jar Jar, who turns, sees Anakin, runs forward like he always does full of smiles and relief. His friend has come back. He stops, confused and looks down. Anakin's lightsaber is impaling him through the midsection up through his body and out of his upper back. Jar Jar is still confused. Anakin turns off the lightsaber and the blade withdraws from Jar Jar's body. Jar Jar falls to the ground in great pain. He doesn't understand. He reaches for his friend, as Anakin steps over his body, and calls his name. Anakin waves his hand and Jar Jar's neck snaps with a sickening pop. Jar Jar mouths Anakin's name as his eyes glaze over and he stops moving. Jar Jar doesn't understand. Anakin steps forward and the door to the council chamber slides open, revealing a room full of kids. Anakin lights his lightsaber, and the camera cuts to a look on one of the children's faces as their eyes lock on the blade. We see the door shut behind Anakin, as he raises the saber, and we hear the sharp scream of a child as the camera pans over Jar Jar's lifeless body. On Dagobah, Obi-Wan gives Luke a gift box full of photos of him and his twin as babies. As he turns the pages, the twin gets older and older, eventually becoming a princess of Alderaan, revealing to Luke that Leia was his sister. Luke begs and begs Ben not to tell Leia and cuts off his tongue to show humility. Ben then drops the lightsaber, which Luke picks up, smiles and tries to kill him with, but finds that instead of activating, the on switch prompts a holo screen to play footage of him and Leia kissing on loop. Ben leaves Luke to his agony and goes to the edge of the swamp laughing. His smile slowly fades to a grimace as he remembers Anakin's betrayal and the heartbreak of striking him down. He pulls a ghost blaster and blows his brains out. Luke goes to Hoth to meet a Wampa shaman, who hypnotizes him to forget his terrible secret. Leia appears in the snow and hugs Luke, and a forced smile appears on his face. Lightsaber and blaster wounds would be horrifying. When superheated plasma hits flesh, it would cause a steam explosion and all sorts of funky chemical reactions. Cutting a hand off wouldn't be a pretty stump, it would be a spurting bloody mess. Stormtroopers would actually hit things and we'd see much more blood. Common use of freak, and we might see Han and Leia act that out in 6. There would probably be more decapitations and dismemberment from the Jedi. The entirety of the arena scene in 2 would have been much cooler too, I think. All that racy dialogue about treaties and elections would get turned up to 11. We'd get to hear about the naughty details of the expected damages incurred due to the blockade, the procedural violations involved in a council for a senator initiating the vote for emergency powers, and the Anakin Padme pillow talk about legitimate governance. This is why I want them to make an Old Republic type of movie. Something where none of the known characters are featured and they can do what they should have done with Anakin, show someone turn to the dark side properly. In the original trilogy, Vader is fairly badass. You could argue he'd be scarier if he were a bit more on the crazy side than composed/managerial person than he is, but he's still pretty cool. Then they went and showed you how much of a whiny bitch he was before he became Vader through the prequels. If those had been R-rated, they could have been so good. Instead, they took what is a dark situation, and made a kid-friendly movie trilogy out of it. The result is pretty lame. I really hope they do an R-rated Star Wars film someday. I think one that's not related to the current folks/sets of films is the best option. There would have been a comical relief scene where Han and Leia are banging in the cargo hold of the Millennium Falcon, where no one could disturb them, and then for some reason C-3PO barges in. Oh dear, I'm frightfully sorry, sir, I'll give you and the princess some privacy. Dreadfully sorry, and then just kinda shuffles out. Then Han would yell out something like yeah, you do that, Goldenrod. Idiot. Now where were we, Your Highness? Here's a few off the top of my head for the more recent film. Made up stuff but spoilers below. Opening with Finn would have had a bit more gore for the bloody hand part. We would have seen Kilo cut the man in two. Someone would spit out blood and curse under their breath. It would either be implied or shown that Rey would have had or been offered to have sex for food. Chewie would actually tear someone's arms off. Other random deaths wouldn't be so instant all the time. More cussing. Stormtroopers would show more than just a scorch mark when shot with a blaster. Force choke would probably make an audible crack/crunching sound. Force lightning would inflict burns rather than just convulsions. Topless slave dancers. Space battles would probably show extra vehicle bodies floating or sucked out of breached hulls. Ewoks might be shown eating those stormtroopers whose helmets they're drumming on. Han Solo torture scene would probably be more graphic instead of cutting away to a scream. R for sex, the flight to Cloud City. Post-Endor. Undoubtedly Anakin and Padme, but I don't remember specifics from those movies. R for violence, blood when hands/arms/Hans get chopped. Instant cauterization my ass. More terrible pain screaming during Leia's interrogation, Han's torture, carbonite freezing, speeder crashes, and Emperor lightning zaps. Massacre on Jabba's barge. Ewoks are a little more sinister, maybe more brutal to dead stormtroopers. R for language, tell me the location of the hidden rebel base. Freak you. Never tell me the freaking odds. Jabba just dropping cuss words every which way. R for nudity. Han comes out of carbonite naked. Bo chicka bow wow. The path of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the inequities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. Blessed is he, who in the name of charity and goodwill, shepherds the weak through the valley of darkness, for he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of lost children. And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who would attempt to poison and destroy my brothers. And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee. Mace Windu before striking down Chancellor Palpatine. Well, back when the Cantina was shot they were still low, landing on an R rating. If you look around there's photos of the prop guys with not only Ponda Baba's severed and bloody arm, but Dr. Evanzen's decapitated head on the floor. So I think Lucas would have gone Barry Visceral with saber combat, gore and blood spray like in his favorite old samurai films. Then to mention a few scenes I haven't seen here. Sarlacc would have torn people apart and impaled them on its teeth. Mace would not have been thrown out the window of the Republica 500, but rather would have been shredded and cooked on the floor in front of us. Anakin would have brutally dismembered Dooku, taking his time and enjoying it. The Battle of Geonosis would have been a brutal, Saving Private Ryan-esque war shoot. Padme would have been killed by Anakin and Obi would have had to do some horrible lightsaber field surgery to get the babies out, and that's about as far as I want to go. Lightsabers and blaster bolts don't leave such clean/cauterized wounds. We get to see troops with ragged holes in their bodies, decapitated torsos, people with half their faces blown off, etc. The Anakin/Padme affair gets shown in more detail. Anakin's horribly mangled and burned body is shown on screen. A first-hand viewpoint from inside the Death Stars as they explode, with hordes of technicians, troopers, staff, etc. rushing for the escape shuttles, their discipline falling apart as they trample and shove each other aside in a mad rush for survival. The Leia bikini scenes get rather explicit. Palpatine's post-lightning disfigurement looks much more horrifying. Anakin brutally slaughters the Sand People. What's left is an entire camp of mangled bodies, some of them with wounds that seem needlessly cruel. They're also posed in gruesome positions. A lot more scenes of civilian/collateral deaths. Anakin/Vader's march on the Jedi Temple would have been bloody and visceral as hell. I'm talking aliens, James Cameron style cinematography, electricity is cut, dark, smoke-filled, explosions, only light emitted is from lightsabers and blaster bolts, with Anakin lunging out of the dark and dismembering Jedi after Jedi after Jedi. Score set to Duel of the Fates with the Imperial March interspersed. Of all the things wrong with the prequels, I think I'm most bitter about the fact that they staged his march on the temple to the clones' Thampe, and not our favorite bombastic Imperial anthem.